My name is Paul Wolver. I'm the owner of Pinellas Power Products, and this is my extended run fuel kit for the Predator PGD95BiSCO and the GenMax GM9000 IED. This kit will work on the gasoline only version and on the propane or dual fuel version. Real quickly, the first question I get asked by everybody is, can I still run the generator off the stock fuel tank? The answer is absolutely yes. You can still run the generator off the stock fuel tank. For the purpose of this video, I will be using the Pulsar dual fuel version. The GenMax is, of course, GenMax bright orange. The Pulsar is blue. Let me show you something real quickly here before I forget. Because this one is dual fuel, the fuel knob in that position is gasoline, in this position is propane, and this position here shuts off the fuel coming through the fuel selector valve itself. Some of the early versions, I understand, had a manual choke. So instead of the automatic choke like this one has, they would have the off position here, and then we'll say run on gasoline over here, and if you turned it all the way down to here, it would be choke. So you would start it in the choke position and then move it up to the run position once it was warmed up. And the same thing for propane. It would be off, propane, and choke. So you'd start it in the propane choke and then move it back to the propane on position. We'll cover a little bit more about that in the product demo video, but I just wanted to clear that up real quickly. Let's go ahead and get started with the installation. The side cover comes off real easy. Use an 8mm socket to pull the 3 side cover bolts out. Incidentally, the side cover bolts are identical. They all look just like this, so you don't have to keep them separated when you get ready to put the cabinet back together. Kit comes with everything you're going to need except for the fuel tank itself. The reason I don't put a fuel tank with it is because each person is going to want a different size fuel tank based on their needs, anywhere from 3 gallons all the way up to 300 gallons. The kit comes with a quick explanation telling you that you've bought the greatest thing since sliced bread. Inside the bag of small parts, there is a flash drive with a copy of the video you're watching now, only without advertisements in the middle of it. It has the fuel pump and everything you're going to need. The first step is going to be to make sure that the fuel selector valve is in the off position. And then we're going to remove the fuel hose that comes from the fuel selector valve and goes to the carburetor. So the one going into the top comes from the fuel tank into the selector valve. The one coming straight out of the back, this small one here, from the selector valve to the carburetor. These 2 heavy ones are for the propane. So this hose is held onto the Corbin clamp, and I'll go ahead and remove the Corbin clamp, and then I'll show you how they work. Okay, this is a Corbin clamp. When you squeeze on these two tabs, the clamp opens up. When you release the tabs, the clamp tightens down. So we're going to put that back on this hose. The next thing I'd like to cover is, because I had some character questioning me on this in a previous generator install, the fitting on the back of the fuel selector valve is 1/4 inch. The fitting going into the carburetor is 3/16. So from the factory they use a 3/16 hose and they stretch it over the back of the fuel selector valve. The hoses that are included in my kit are Gates Barricade low permeability hoses, which are 2 layers of cord in them. They will not stretch. So I use a 1/4 inch hose here on the 1/4 inch barb and 3/16 hoses on the 3/16 barb. So at any rate, no, this isn't a mistake, and no, it won't leak the way I do it. As a matter of fact, it would be more prone to problems the way the factory did it, stretching a small hose over a large area. But you'll notice that the small hose does return to the 3/16 size very quickly. It's just such a small, thin hose that it's very flexible and allows that. The next step will be to remove the breather hose. And that's this hose that goes from the valve cover area to the air box. And that slides out quite simple. And we'll set this off to the side. We will be reusing this later. And then there's a retainer that holds the breather hose to the spark plug wire, or excuse me, to the fuel tank vent loop hose. We'll set that aside for too. The next step is going to be to remove the valve cover. And there's a plastic cover over the valve cover that we have to remove first. And it is also held on with 8mm, or with bolts with an 8mm head. It's actually a 6mm bolt and an 8mm head on it. We'll slide this plastic cover up and spin it out of the way. I'm going to pull the spark plug wire off first. And you'll notice that there's a small ground lead that goes to the upper right-hand corner of the valve cover. So we're going to take that valve cover bolt out now so that we can get this plastic cover completely out of the way. Then we'll take the other 3 valve cover bolts out. You'll notice that the battery has the terminals out here by the cover. And what that does is it causes the battery strap to run at an angle. So I'm going to take the battery out and spin it around, which gets the battery terminals out of our way and also allows the strap to run straight over the battery. A much cleaner install, and I suspect that that's the way the engineers who designed this had intended it to be, but the people on the assembly line misunderstood the instruction. At least that's my suspicion. You'll notice now with the battery like this, the terminals are out of our way and the battery retainer strap fits straight over the battery. Okay, now on the valve cover, the breather plate is held into the valve cover with 4 more bolts, and each of these bolts have an 8mm head on them and a 6mm thread. what we're going to do is disable the PCV valve that is in here, and my kit comes with a new PCV valve that'll be external to the engine, and that's going to allow us to use crankcase pressure and vacuum to drive the fuel pump. So what you'll do is take one of the zip ties included in the kit and poke it through from the back, and you see that this thin wafer of steel is the PCV valve. So then we're going to take the zip tie and strap this PCV valve in the open position. Like so. So now, take another zip tie just to show you. There's nothing keeping air from flowing in and out both directions through that hole. This is a new generator, so all the gaskets came apart in perfect condition, so we will be able to reuse the gaskets without putting any gasket sealant on it. My kit comes with a tube of gasket sealant, and it is genuine Permatex RTB black. If your gasket does not come away nice and clean, then you'll be using gasket sealant on the gasket area here. This zip tie is just hitting the inside of that case. I'm going to put a new zip tie on it in a slightly different way so that it will fit through there without hitting the valve cover itself. Okay. So what I've done is put the zip tie on with the clasp over to the side, so that now the clasp of the zip tie does not hit the case and hold it out of place. So we're going to go ahead and put the stock bolts back in. And again, the valve cover itself, the gasket came off nice and clean with no damage, so we will not need to put gasket sealer on this either. If yours comes off this clean, you keep the tube of gasket sealer for a later day. So we're going to put the first 3 bolts in now, and then, as you remember, the ground strap that we did, or we removed, has to be looped around like this, so that it can go up onto the top corner bolt. Of the bolts you have left, the longer chrome ones are the ones that hold the valve cover in place. The shorter chrome ones are for the plastic cover that go over the valve cover. Okay, At this point you have two choices. You can either put this bolt in now, holding the ground strap on, and totally leave the plastic cover off of the valve cover area. Because I like doing things the hard way, I'm going to put the plastic valve cover or the plastic cover back on. All this is for is a beauty cover. It serves no purpose for the engine at all. And if you're like me and you like doing things the most difficult possible way, then you'll go ahead and put this on. We're going to go ahead and put the breather hose on now. And we're going to put a zip tie on it to hold it on very tight. The reason we're going to use a zip tie instead of a clamp is there's simply not enough room, and if you are going to be putting the plastic cover on like I am, you're going to quickly see what I mean. There's no extra room to work with. The zip tie is a low enough profile that it'll actually fit in there. And these zip ties are supposed to be rated at 20 pounds working load limit. I'll take them at their word. I have not had any fail. So we're going to be using a zip tie as a clamp on this. And remember, as I stated earlier, this is going to be used as a pulse line now to drive the pump. There was no clamp at all on it factory, but I really feel better having a clamp on there so that it does not come loose on you. We're going to go ahead and cut the tail off that zip tie to give us some working room. And now the fun part. We're going to feed the original breather hose and the ground strap through this hole. And then we're going to turn the ground strap up and run the upper right-hand corner valve cover bolt through that ground strap. And that would be the fourth of the long chrome bolts. And when you do this, you'll fold the tab of the ring terminal. Like right here's the valve cover here. You're going to take the ring terminal and fold the tab down tight against the valve cover so that this plastic cover will be able to go on. And if you got your flashlight, why don't you go ahead and try to get a shot of that. If you look, there's a ring terminal on this bolt. And you can see how that's folded over against the, there, nice, 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 okay. And now this cover is held on by the original 4 bolts. We'll put them in. If you attempt to put this black plastic cover on and you start getting frustrated and start using words you can spell, the cover is not necessary. It's strictly a beauty cover. So you can leave the black plastic cover off. And we're going to leave this hanging loose like this for now. The spark plug, we're going to go ahead and put the plug cap back on. Okay. Included in the kit will be the prime bulb hose and a section of 1/4-inch Gates barricade low prone hose. And you can see how much thicker the walls of the hose that I use are, and they do have that braided sleeve area in them. So the first thing we're going to do is cut a section of it 7 inches long. And we're going to put this on to the back of the fuel selector valve, right where the stock 3/16 hose used to be stretched over it. And I covered why we're putting 1/4 inch hose on, because that is a 1/4 inch fitting on the back of the fuel selector valve. And then the kit comes with a bunch of snapper clamps. The way they work is you put them over the hose and then you squeeze down on the side tabs. If you need to undo it, you simply twist sideways. When you go to put them together, if they rock over sideways on you, you go like that to straighten them out. So we're going to put one on this hose where it goes over the back of the fuel selector valve. I'm not sure you can see it clearly with the camera. Okay. Then on the original 3/16 hose, the kit comes with a 3/16 to 1/4 adapter. So we're going to put the 3/16 side of that adapter into the original 3/16 hose and slide the original Corbin clamp down into place. We're good. Then we're going to take a 12-inch section of the 1/4 inch hose that's included in the kit. As well as another one of my plastic clamps. And we're going to slide the 1/4 inch hose onto the 1/4 inch side of that adapter, like so. And we're going to use one of the white hose clamps. Cinch it down nicely. Then we'll take the fuel pump that's included in the kit. First thing is the fuel pump does have 2 little plastic covers, one over the input side and one over the output side of the fuel pump. Don't forget to take these out because they will stop any fuel flow. This barb here is for fuel entering the pump. This barb is for fuel leaving the pump, and this is the pulse line. So this hose that we've got right here is fuel leaving the pump going into the carburetor. We're going to take it and route it below the original stock breather line and the vent line, and that will go onto the fuel output hose. And incidentally, these hose barbs are a little bit difficult to get on. It may be easier for you to take the dipstick and just drop just a couple of drops of oil onto it to get the hose barbs to slide into place. Then we'll use another hose clamp right here. Okay. Then, included in the kit is a T-fitting, and that's going to go into the 7-inch hose that was attached to the back of the fuel selector valve. And you'll notice it goes in this manner. So the one that's teed off will point to this corner of the generator. Like so. Then we're going to take another 12-inch section of hose. We're going to attach it to the T-fitting on this section here. And since this is going on to the back of the fuel selector valve, you know that this is fuel in. So this one will go to the fuel input port on the fuel pump, which is this one right here. I'm not putting hose clamps on them at this time. I will come along and put hose clamps on at the end so that if we need to adjust the length of any of these hoses or the routing of them, we can do it more easily. Once we get everything set up and in place, we're going to go back through it and put hose clamps onto everything. Then included in the kit is the replacement PCV valve. As you remember, this hose used to just shove into this hole in the back of the airbox. Now this hose is going to go into the hole in the back of the airbox. And you'll notice that they're approximately the same size. This is the PCV valve itself, and this is going to go into the original breather hose. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the original breather hose. We'll slide this in. And all this is doing is just dumping air into the airbox. So when you got it held in place, mark approximately where it's going to need to be cut at, and then go ahead and cut it. I favor cutting it just a little bit long because you can always shorten it. You can't lengthen it. Okay, I'm going to shorten that a little bit more because I don't like this bunching up. These hoses all fit nicely into there. Okay. I'm going to rotate this clamp around to where it faces either forward or backward, it doesn't matter. I just don't want this clamping portion to be interfering with the PCV valve line. And it's easy to fix right now. As I said earlier, when you're trying to undo them, just grasp one side and twist down on it. So I've routed it now to where the clasp portion of this clamp faces that way and stays completely out of our way. works quite nicely there. The next thing we're going to do is take a 30-inch section of hose. This 30-inch section of hose will go onto this T-fitting from the replacement PCV valve and loop around and come back to the pulse port on the fuel pump. I'm going to go ahead and slide this out. It's just easier to do it that way. Okay. First thing is the hose that we just installed. Up here on this cast aluminum bracket, if you look up in here, you'll see that there is a hole that is threaded into the cast aluminum bracket with no bolt in it. We're simply going to fit one of the zip ties through that hole and loop it around and hold this hose in place so it'll stay where we put it and not cause you any problems when you go to put the side cover back on. And you'll get plenty of zip ties in the kit. It's a bit of a pain, but it's not nearly as big of a pain as putting that valve cover, plastic beauty cover on. Okay. Then right above the PCV valve, take a zip tie, and it'll go right about the middle of this hose and loop around this fitting that holds the stepper motor to the top of the carburetor. And that will also help to hold this hose into place when you're opening and closing the door. So now what we're going to do is take one of our plastic clamps and put it below the zip tie that we just put into place. And onto the top of the PCV valve. So what we want is no air leaking before the PCV valve, because then it could suck air in. After the PCV valve, it's not a real big deal, because it's going into the air box, which is under a slight vacuum, if anything, under hard acceleration, or in this case under a hard load applied. And now we're just going to go through and put hose clamps on every single connection that we've added. And that would include the pre-assembled PCV valve, messed up that clamp just a little bit. There's a thin wafer that goes between the bottom portion of the clasp and the hose itself. You don't want that to get in the wrong spot. Let me show you on a clamp that you can see off to itself. This is the thin wafer that I'm talking about, and that goes inside this. So when it clamps together, it goes like this. And I was in a bit of a hurry, and it went up. It got between here and here, and it won't do it now, but it did when I was in a bit of a hurry. So just make sure you don't have that problem. Okay. Then on the fuel line coming out of the, not sure I like this. I'm going to move the fuel line above this propane hose just to give this a smoother arc to it. And it's easy to do right now. It probably won't make a hill of beans a difference, but it just make it a little bit smoother arc, and you'll see what I mean. And that's one of the reasons why I don't put hose clamps on it until everything is in place so I can look at it. Okay, so now if you look, this is the propane hose. Can you see it without the flashlight? Okay. So this is the hose that we put onto the back of the fuel selector valve. This is the propane hose, and I'm running it above that. I like the way that fits just a little bit nicer. Okay. So now we're going to put hose clamps on this. I'm going to face that one backward because there's plenty of room back there, and it just has a cleaner look about it. Same way with this one. Put hose clamps on the fuel pump itself. Okay. The final leg of the T-fitting is going to go to the quick disconnect fitting that is your fuel inlet for the generator. Now, on this generator, if we were to put it here or something like that, it would stick out of the side of the housing. And that's your choice as the installer and owner of the generator as to where you put this at. The most difficult place that I could find to put it, and the most protected, is right down here. It'll stick out the front. The problem being, when you fold the handle down, if it's sticking out here, the handle will hit it. However, if we shorten these handles, or at least this side handle, by 2 inches, the handle will end here, and then it will protect this fitting, because anything that's coming along would hit the handle and protect the fuel fitting. So as I say, you can put it right down here. Is very easy to install, and you can face it forward, But the only problem I have with it is I don't like things sticking out of the side of the generator, because then you could trip on it or whatever. So in order to shorten the handle, just hook your fingers behind the rubber grip and it'll slide off. And of course, you'd ultimately do both sides. I'm only going to do one side for the purpose of this video. And I will cut it 2 inches shorter, and then we'll slide the handle back on, and that'll give us room to do the rest of the install. I'm going to shorten that by 2 1/4 inches just to give us a little bit more room. And as I said before, you can either shorten just one or both. If you shorten both of them, then it'll be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. If you shorten just one, it works fine. You vacuum up these metal filings real quick. If you don't have a burring knife, a simple piece of sandpaper just to take the slag off of that. It works just fine. As I said, you can do both sides if you want. But now, when it folds down, we're going to have room for our fitting. Now, what we need to do is take the front cover off so that we can mount the fuel fitting. First step will be to take a 14mm end wrench and take this nut off of the handlebars. You don't take the bolt all the way out, we just push it back just enough. And you'll see why in a couple seconds here. Then we'll take these bolts out, and these are the same as the side cover bolts. magnet's not doing a really good job on this. So you'll unsnap this, and you'll notice this side is so tight that we took that nut off and slid this bolt out. And now we can unsnap this and slide it out of the way. The only reason we're doing this is so we can see the back of this and make sure what we're doing. I would recommend folding the handle down at this point so you can get a good idea of where your fuel fitting enters at. If you drill the hole for the fuel fitting too high, you'd simply need to shorten this another quarter or a half inch, whatever. It's not that big a deal, but if you drill the fuel fitting low enough, you don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to drill it all the way with a step drill. I'm going to take a repairman's reamer and do the last little bit by hand because I want a nice snug fit. What we're going to be doing is screwing the quick disconnect fitting onto the hose barb in the back, and they will come down together and create a pinch point between the two hexes. Included in the kit is a 1/2 inch flat washer. If, when you initially tighten this down, if it's not a fairly snug fit, in other words if this rattles, you'll put the flat washer in between here as well so that it creates a pinch between the flat washer and this hex so that the fuel fitting is held fairly tight. Initially I'm going to do it without the flat washer, and if it doesn't tighten down all the way, then I'll take it back apart and put the flat washer on it. So you're going to take Teflon tape included in the kit and wrap it around the threads of the fitting. Be certain not to wrap it over the end of the threads like that, because if you do, when you screw the hose barb on, it'll shear off that little piece of Teflon tape. Truth be known, that piece of Teflon tape will get caught in the fuel filter that we're going to be installing in the next step, but we don't want to have any more debris in the fuel filter than is absolutely necessary. I'll stand over here so that you can get a better shot at that. Okay, this one did not need the 1/2-inch flat washer, but that's why the 1/2-inch flat washer is in the kit. So now, take the remaining section of hose, and I'm going to attach it to the back of the hose barb first. And then we'll take one of our hose clamps, included in the kit, tighten that down. Then if you come over this side, this hose is ultimately going to run up here and go to this. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on first, and then we're going to cut it somewhere in the center and add the fuel filter. I'd like the fuel filter to be clearly visible right about here. Put another hose clamp right here. This is the fuel filter, and the arrows on the fuel filter indicate the direction of fuel flow, which will be from the fuel tank up into the carburetor. I'm going to shorten this top section because I want it right here where it's clearly visible. Okay, if you want to take a minute to go over that and just see if you want to look at all the hoses and make sure that none of them are kinked or anything like that. So we're going to take our last hose, which goes from the fuel inlet port, cut it appropriate length, and I'm going to cut it just a little bit longer than what it looks like it needs to be. And I'm going to take another hose, or excuse me, zip tie, and I'm going to zip tie this hose to the battery strap. And you'll notice the fact that we reversed the battery allows us plenty of room right here. And it also allows the battery strap to run straight instead of having to twist as it goes over the top of the battery. like I say, I suspect that that's how the engineers who designed this generator intended it to be. But something got lost in the assembly process. Okay. All of our hoses are a nice smooth flow. Let me trim off the tail end of this zip tie. We'll go ahead and put our front cover back on. Put the left side in first, because that has to go below this latch. Incidentally, you'll notice that there are slots on this cover here and here, and there are tabs on this, so it has to go into place and then slide toward the generator in order to fit real nice. I'm going to put the middle bolt into each side first. And if anything doesn't fit exactly correct, go ahead and find out why. Don't just beat on it. If it all lined up before you took it apart, it should all line up before you go to put it back together again. Nut back on those handlebars. You'll notice that we've got perfect clearance between this handlebar and the fuel fitting now. If it were too tight, you could always pull it apart. You saw how it's done, and shorten it again a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and shorten both sides of this so that they match, but we don't need to do that on camera because the install video is long enough already. So now the next step will be to put this cover back on. One last look to make sure that everything is neatly in place. There are 4 snaps as well as the 3 tabs and then 3 screws that hold this cover on. Also included in my kit is an instruction decal that tells you how to operate it with the remote fuel kit installed and how to operate it on the stock fuel tank. On this generator, stock fuel tank is exactly like the owner's manual tells you, no alterations whatsoever. Stick this decal wherever there's room. I'm going to put it on top of the fuel tank. That way it's clearly visible, because normally the generator is going to be on the ground and people are going to be looking at the top of the generator as opposed to the side of the generator. I'm going to put it off to this side only because this side has the runoff area in case somebody overfills the gasoline. Gasoline will run off on that side, and we don't want that glue on the sticker to be dissolved by gasoline. So I'm going to put the sticker off to this side. Truth be known, once you've used the generator a couple of times, you're going to remember all the details that are written on that sticker. I will tell you this right off, step 7 on that sticker is not a misprint. That's the one that tells you to move the fuel selector valve to the off position in order to run it off the remote tank. Remember, running it off a gasoline stock tank would be like this. Running it off the remote tank would be like this. Or running it off the propane would be like this. But I'll cover that more in the product demo video. If you have any questions about this and you're watching this video on YouTube, please look at the description section below and you'll see that there is a link to my website twice. Please do not send me messages through YouTube. I do not monitor YouTube. I simply don't have the time to monitor chat rooms or YouTube or anything like that. Please go to my website and either email me or give me a phone call. That's what I'm here for. If you've got any questions whatsoever, they should be answered on the website. If they're not answered on the website, give me a call. I'd be happy to answer them for you. I thank you so much for your time.